Snow fell heavy over Chicago's west side that Thanksgiving night. The streets were empty, except for the blinking lights of establishments that stayed open for the lonely, the forgotten, those with no family to return to. Yeo Tai-sung stood at the window of his third-floor office, watching the city below. His geometric Korean tattoos, interlocking hexagons forming the symbol of his bloodline, climbed up his neck and disappeared beneath the collar of his perfectly pressed shirt. At 35, he'd built an empire in the shadows, but tonight, surrounded by untouched bottles of soju and framed photos of parents he hadn't seen in a decade, loneliness was an open wound. "Boss, you should go home," said Ro Daewon, his right-hand man, standing in the doorway. At 42, Daewon had known Tai-sung since they were teenagers running the streets of Seoul. "This is my home," Tai-sung replied in Korean, eyes never leaving the window. 3 blocks away, in the damp basement of an abandoned building, 3 girls huddled under a thin blanket. Camilla Brooks, 16 years old, kept her younger sisters close to her body, trying to share what little warmth they had. "Cam, I'm hungry," whispered Soleil, the youngest at 8, her big brown eyes full of unshed tears. "I know, baby. Tomorrow I'll figure something out, I promise." Camilla squeezed her little sister tighter, feeling the crushing weight of responsibility. 3 weeks since they'd run from the foster system. 3 weeks living on the streets, dodging social services, gangs, predators. "That Chinese restaurant was still open," said Indy, the middle child at 12, always observant. "The lady there looked nice." "No charity," Camilla snapped, harsher than she meant to. "We can't trust anyone." But fate had other plans. Around 11 p.m., when Tai-sung finally decided to walk the streets to clear his mind, he heard it, a muffled cry coming from the alley beside Mrs. Liang's restaurant. His instincts, sharpened by years of surviving dangerous worlds, made him pause. There, huddled between dumpsters, were 3 black girls. The oldest immediately stood up, placing herself in front of her sisters like a human shield. "Don't come closer," Camilla shouted, gripping a shard of glass with a trembling hand. Tai-sung stopped. He recognized that look, the same terror and determination he'd seen in his own reflection years ago when he'd arrived in America with no English, no money, no one. "You hungry?" he asked in accented English, keeping his distance. Slowly he pulled his wallet from his pocket and placed it on the ground. "Restaurant there, Mrs. Liang. Tell her Tai-sung sent you. She'll feed you." Before Camilla could respond, he was already walking away, hands in pockets, disappearing into the blizzard. Indy was the first to move, grabbing the wallet. Inside, she found $500 in cash and a business card with just a phone number. "Who was that guy?" Soleil asked, still shivering. Camilla stared in the direction where the man had vanished, her survivor's mind calculating risks and possibilities. But something in those eyes, a familiarity with pain, made her hesitate before throwing the money away. "I don't know," she murmured. "But let's eat first. Then we decide." What none of them knew was that this brief encounter in the alley had triggered a series of events that would intertwine their destinies in ways impossible to predict. Because Tai-sung, the man who'd built walls around his heart after years of betrayal and loss, had just found something he wasn't looking for, a purpose beyond survival. And the Brooks sisters, used to being invisible to a world that didn't want them, were about to discover that protection could come from the most unlikely sources. Their story was just beginning. Mrs. Liang didn't ask questions when the 3 girls walked into her restaurant at 11:30 p.m., soaked with snow and clutching Tai-sung's card. She simply sat them at the back table, brought warm blankets, and started preparing food. "You know Mr. Yo?" she asked in careful English as she placed steaming bowls of jjajangmyeon and tangsuyuk in front of them. "Who?" Camilla asked, defensive. "Tai-sung, the man who sent you here." Mrs. Liang smiled gently. "He looks scary, yes, but he has good heart. Broken heart, but good." Soleil devoured the food like she hadn't eaten in days, because she hadn't. Indy watched everything with curious eyes, cataloguing every detail. The photos on the wall, the Chinese characters, the way Mrs. Liang looked at them with maternal concern. "Why did he help us?" Camilla finally asked, lowering her guard just a millimeter. Mrs. Liang sat down, her weathered hands wrapping around a cup of tea. "Tae-sung came here 15 years ago. 16, maybe. Alone, like you. Slept in alleys like you. He remembers. Is he—" Indy started. "Dangerous, yes. Powerful, yes. But also lost." Mrs. Liang sighed. "Some of us build empires to forget we have no home." Camilla processed this while helping Soleil wipe sauce from her chin. She knew that kind of loneliness, the kind that comes not from being alone, but from never having roots. "Where do you sleep?" Mrs. Liang asked gently. "We have a place," Camilla lied quickly. Mrs. Liang didn't believe her but didn't push. "Bathroom in back, hot water, clean clothes in closet, leftover donations. Use what you need." After they'd washed up and changed clothes, Mrs. Liang waited until they were ready to leave. "Take this," she said, handing over a bag of packaged food. "And this," an address scribbled on paper. "Empty apartment above laundromat. Owner owes me favor, 1 week free after that. We see." Camilla felt tears burn her eyes. "Why? Why are you doing this?" "Because someone did it for me once. Because Tae-sung did it for me once." Mrs. Liang touched Camilla's face gently. "And because 3 girls alone in Chicago in winter. This is not right. World is cruel enough already." Meanwhile, in Tae-sung's office, Dae-won was reporting the night's updates. "Phantom's moving on territory again. He wants the west side." Tae-sung didn't even look up from his documents. "Let him try." "Boss, you seem distracted." For the first time in hours, Tae-sung paused. The 3 girls in the alley came back to his mind, especially the oldest one, with that warrior's look, despite her frail body. "How old were you when you came to Chicago?" Tae-sung asked suddenly. Dae-won blinked, surprised. 19. Why?" "I was 16. Do you remember what it was like? The fear, not knowing if you'd wake up the next day." "I remember." Dae-won sat down, sensing something had shifted. "What happened tonight?" Tae-sung finally looked at him. "I saw. Ghosts of who I was. And I realized I built all this." He gestured at the empire around them. "But for what? To die alone in an empty office on Thanksgiving?" "You're not alone, boss. You have all of us." "That's not the same." Tae-sung's fingers traced the geometric patterns on his neck unconsciously. These tattoos, they're supposed to represent lineage, family, legacy. But what legacy am I leaving? Fear? Money? An empty throne? Dae-won had never heard his boss talk like this. In 15 years of loyalty, he'd seen Tae-sung be ruthless, strategic, cold when necessary. But vulnerable? Never. "The girls in the alley," Dae-won said quietly. "They got to you. The oldest one. She looked at me like I was a monster, and she was right." Tae-sung stood, walking to the window. "But she also stood between me and her sisters without hesitation. When's the last time someone was willing to die for me? Not for money, not for respect, but just because. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." Tae-sung pulled out his phone, staring at the number he'd memorized from the security footage of the alley. "But I'm tired of being alone, Dae-won. I'm tired of survival being the only thing that matters." The apartment above the laundromat was small but warm. For the first time in 3 weeks, the Brooks sisters slept in actual beds with clean sheets and locked doors. Camilla lay awake, listening to her sister's breathing. Indy had fallen asleep clutching the business card, fascinated by the mystery of the tattooed stranger. Soleil slept with a full stomach for the first time in days, a small smile on her face. But Camilla couldn't rest. Years in the system had taught her that kindness always came with a price. Men who gave money wanted something back, always. She pulled out her sketchbook, the one thing she'd managed to keep through all the chaos, and began to draw. The stranger's face emerged on the page. Sharp angles, distant eyes, tattoos that looked like sacred geometry. But she also drew something else she'd seen in that brief moment, a recognition, a shared pain. "Who are you?" she whispered to the drawing. A knock on the door made her freeze. At 2 a.m., nothing good came knocking. She grabbed the kitchen knife Mrs. Liang had left in the drawer and approached the door carefully. "Who is it?" "Detective Everett Kane, Chicago PD. I'm looking for 3 minor runaways." Camila's blood ran cold. She looked back at her sleeping sisters and made a decision in half a second. She opened the door just a crack, standing in the gap so he couldn't see inside. "Wrong apartment," she said. Detective Kane was a tall black man in his late 30s, with kind eyes that had seen too much. He didn't look like he believed her, but he also didn't look like he wanted to push. "Look, kid, I know you're in there. Mrs. Liang already called it in, not to report you, but to make sure you were safe." He held up his hands, showing he meant no harm. "I'm not here to drag you back to the system. I just need to know you're okay." "We're fine." "Fine isn't sleeping in alleys in November." Kane sighed. "I've read your file, Camila. I know why you ran. And between you and me, I don't blame you. That foster home was a nightmare waiting to happen." Camila's grip on the knife tightened. "So, what do you want?" "I want to help. Real help, not system help." He pulled out a card, different from Tae-sung's. This one had an actual name and badge number. "But I can't do that if you don't trust me enough to talk. I don't trust cops." "Smart kid." Kane smiled sadly. "But I'm one of the good ones, I promise. And I'm also concerned about something else." "What?" "The man who gave you money tonight. Yo Tae-sung." Kane's expression darkened. "You know who he is? Some guy who felt sorry for us. That guy runs half the underground in this city. Korean organized crime, protection rackets, everything your tax dollars don't cover." Kane leaned closer. "I'm not saying he's going to hurt you. Hell, knowing his reputation, he probably won't. But men like that don't do favors for free." Camilla processed this, her mind racing. "What do you know about him?" Kane hesitated, then decided honesty was better. First-generation immigrant, came here alone as a teenager, built his organization from nothing. Ruthless when he needs to be, but he's got a code. Doesn't deal drugs, doesn't touch kids, doesn't tolerate abuse. It's why I haven't been able to touch him. Everyone he protects actually loves him." "Sounds like you respect him." "I respect what he could have been if the world had given him a fair shot." Kane straightened up. "Look, I'll make you a deal. You keep this apartment for the week, keep your sisters safe and in school. Yeah, I know Indy's a genius and Soleil needs structure. I'll work on finding you a better placement, something real. But if Tae-sung comes around again, you call me. Not because he's dangerous, but because I need to know what he wants. And if I don't, then I'll have to do my job and report 3 minors living alone." Kane's voice was gentle but firm. "I don't want to do that, Camila. But I will, if I think you're in danger." After he left, Camila locked the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. 2 powerful men interested in them in one night. A detective and a crime boss. And somehow she'd have to navigate both to keep her sisters safe. She looked at her sketchbook again, at the drawing of Tae-sung. Mrs. Liang had said he had a good heart. Detective Kane had said he had a code. But Camilla had learned the hard way that men with power, good intentions or not, were still dangerous. The question was, which danger was worth the risk? The next morning, Indy woke up to find Camila hadn't slept at all. Her older sister sat at the small kitchen table, surrounded by sketches and that business card, looking like she'd aged 5 years overnight. "Cam?" Indy approached carefully. At 12, she'd learned to read her sister's moods like weather patterns. "What happened?" "A cop came by last night. Knows we're here." "Are we running again?" Fear crept into Indy's voice. "I don't know yet." Camila rubbed her eyes. "He says he wants to help, but you don't trust him." "I don't trust anyone." Camila looked at the card again. Except maybe. I don't know. This whole thing feels wrong. Indy picked up one of the sketches, the one of Tai Sung. Her sister had drawn him multiple times during the night, each version revealing something different. In one he looked like a monster, in another he looked haunted, in the most recent one he looked almost protective. What if he's like us? Indy asked quietly. What do you mean? Someone who had to become scary to survive. Someone who built armor because the world kept hurting them. Indy traced the geometric tattoos in the drawing. These patterns, they're traditional Korean, right? I read about them once. They're supposed to protect the wearer like spiritual shields. Camila looked at her sister with amazement. Indy devoured books like other kids devoured candy, absorbing everything. Where did you read that? Library before we ran. There was this book about Asian cultural tattoos. Indy's eyes lit up with that familiar hunger for knowledge. Different cultures use geometry differently. Korean patterns are about balance and protection. They're not meant to scare people. They're meant to guard the person wearing them. You think his tattoos mean he's trying to protect himself, or protect something he lost? Indy sat down next to Camila. Maybe he saw us and remembered when he needed protecting too. Before Camila could respond, Soleil emerged from the bedroom, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Is there breakfast? Yeah, baby. Mrs. Liang left us some stuff. Camila pushed her paranoia aside to focus on her sisters. Come on, let's eat. As they ate rice and banchan from Mrs. Liang's care package, Camila made a decision. Indy, you're going to do something for me today. What? Research. Find out everything you can about Yo Tae-sung. Not the scary crime stuff, the human stuff. Where he came from, why he came here, what drives him. Camila pulled out the $20 Mrs. Liang had also left. Library's 2 blocks away. You're good at being invisible. And you? I'm going to talk to Mrs. Liang. Get answers. Camila looked at Soleil. And you're staying here locked in, don't open the door for anyone. Not even the nice man from last night? Camila and Indy both froze. What nice man? Camila asked carefully. The one who left the bag. Soleil pointed to a paper bag sitting by the door that definitely hadn't been there when the detective left. Camila approached it like it might explode. Inside, 3 winter coats exactly the right sizes, a box of hot breakfast sandwiches still warm, an envelope with a single sentence in precise handwriting. Nobody should be cold on Thanksgiving weekend. Tea. No demands, no strings, just kindness. Indy picked up one of the coats, a purple puffer that fit her perfectly. He came back while we were sleeping? And he knew our sizes. Camila's mind raced. How did he know our sizes? Maybe he's really good at observing people? Indy suggested. Like you are with art, he's probably good with details. Camila wanted to be suspicious, to reject the gifts, to protect her sisters from whatever trap this might be. But she also saw Soleil's face light up when she tried on the pink coat, saw how it actually fit, how warm it looked. We keep them, Camila decided, but I'm definitely talking to Mrs. Liang now. Mrs. Liang was preparing lunch when Camila arrived at the restaurant. The old woman looked up and smiled like she'd been expecting her. Sit, Mrs. Liang commanded gently, already preparing tea. You have questions. Why is he doing this? Camila got straight to the point. What does he want from us? Nothing. Nobody helps for nothing. Mrs. Liang poured tea with practiced precision. You're right, usually. But Tai-sung is. She paused, searching for words. He's different. Broken in specific way. I don't understand. When Tai-sung came here, he was barely older than you. 16, maybe 17. His father had been killed in Seoul. Gang violence. His mother used all their money to send him to America, told him to survive, to be safe. Mrs. Liang's eyes grew distant. But America was not safe. He slept in alleys, starved, fought, did things he's not proud of, built empire not because he wanted power, but because he never wanted to be helpless again. Camila sipped her tea, recognizing the story because it mirrored her own in too many ways. "But Empire is lonely," Mrs. Liang continued. "All that power, all that respect, and still he eats Thanksgiving alone. Still he has no one to protect him." She looked at Camila directly. Then he sees 3 girls in alley. And he remembers. He remembers being 16 and alone and terrified. So we're what, his charity case, his redemption arc? You're his reminder that he's still human. Mrs. Liang's voice was firm. He's not looking for thanks. He's not looking for loyalty. He's looking for purpose beyond survival. You 3 gave him that just by existing. That's a lot of pressure to put on 3 kids. Is it? Mrs. Liang raised an eyebrow. You protect your sisters with everything you have, yes, would die for them, in a heartbeat. Then you understand him better than you think. He just has bigger resources to protect with. Camila sat with that for a moment. She'd spent so long seeing threats everywhere that she'd forgotten some people just helped. Not for gain, but because they remembered what it was like to need help. What about the detective? Camila asked. Kane. He came by last night. Mrs. Liang's expression shifted. Everett is good man too. Complicated but good. He's been trying to catch Tai Sung for years, but I think secretly he respects him. They're not so different, both trying to protect this neighborhood in their own way. So I'm caught between a crime boss and a detective. You're caught between 2 men who see 3 girls in danger and want to help. Mrs. Liang smiled. The question is not who to trust. Question is, what do you need? Camila thought about her sisters. Soleil needed stability, routine, school. Indy needed books, education, a chance to use that brilliant mind. And she needed to not carry everything alone anymore. I need safety, Camila admitted quietly. Real safety. Not just for a week, but forever. Then maybe you stop running and start building. Mrs. Liang patted her hand. Tai Sung built empire from nothing. Detective Kane built career from nothing. You can build family from nothing too. But you can't do it alone. And you can't do it without accepting help. Meanwhile, at the Chicago Public Library, Indy was doing what she did best. Research. She'd found articles about Korean immigration in the 90s and early 2000s, about first-generation struggles, about how some kids who came alone turned to organized crime, not from evil but from necessity. She'd found mentions of the Yeo family, never by name, but by reputation. Protectors of Koreatown, they called them. The ones you went to when the police wouldn't help, when landlords threatened, when violence came knocking. But she'd also found something else, a grainy newspaper photo from 12 years ago. A young Tai Sung, maybe 23, standing outside a burning building with a child in his arms. The headline read, "Local man saves family from arson attack." Indy photocopied the article and kept digging. More stories emerged. A restaurant owner whose business was saved from aggressive developers. A woman whose abusive ex-husband disappeared after one visit from Tai Sung. An elderly couple whose medical bills mysteriously got paid after they were evicted. He wasn't a hero in the traditional sense, but he was a guardian in the shadows, protecting those the system ignored. She was so absorbed in her research that she didn't notice someone sit down next to her until he spoke. That's a lot of articles about Korean organized crime for a 12-year-old. Indy looked up to find Tai Sung himself sitting beside her, dressed in a simple black sweater and jeans, looking far less intimidating than last night. His geometric tattoos peeked out from his collar, catching the library's fluorescent light. "You followed me," Indy stated calmly, not as afraid as she should be. "I protect what's mine." Then he paused. "That came out wrong. I meant I'm keeping an eye on you 3, making sure you're safe. We're not yours to protect." "I know, but I'm doing it anyway." Tai Sung glanced at the photocopies. "Finding what you're looking for. Depends. Are you a good guy or a bad guy?" "Probably both." His honesty surprised her. "I've done things I'm not proud of, hurt people who deserved it, built power on fear. But I've also protected people who had nowhere else to turn. So you tell me. Indy studied him with those sharp 12-year-old eyes. You saved that family from the fire. Arson attack by a rival gang. The father worked in my territory, refused to pay protection to the other side. They tried to make an example. Tae-sung's jaw tightened. I made an example of them instead. By making them disappear? By making them leave Chicago and never come back. He met her gaze steadily. I'm not a killer, Indy. Not if I don't have to be, but I am very good at making problems go away. How do you know my name? Mrs. Liang told me. I asked her about the 3 girls I helped last night. Tae-sung leaned back. She told me your sister draws, you read everything, and the little one loves pink. She also told me you ran from a foster home where the father was. Inappropriate. Indy's blood ran cold. She had no right. She had every right. Because that man, the one who made you run... Tae-sung's voice dropped to something dangerous. He's going to have a very bad week, not violent, just financially devastating, and he'll know exactly why. You can't just... I already did. Last night after I left you the coats, Tae-sung stood up. Nobody touches kids in my city. Nobody. That's my one absolute rule. Indy watched him prepare to leave, her mind struggling to categorize him. Why are you really doing this? Tae-sung paused, his hand on the back of the chair. You know what these tattoos mean? He touched his neck, where the geometric patterns were visible. Protection, balance, family. My grandmother gave me these patterns before I left Seoul. Said they'd keep me safe, remind me where I came from. His fingers traced the hexagons gently. But I forgot. I spent so long surviving that I forgot what I was supposed to be surviving for. Then I saw you 3 in that alley and I remembered. Remembered what? That protection is supposed to run both ways. That power means nothing if you don't use it to guard the helpless. He looked at her directly. You 3 don't need me. Your sister Camila is fierce enough to move mountains. But you shouldn't have to fight alone. Nobody should. After he left, Indy sat there for a long time, looking at the photocopies and the business card, and trying to understand how the world could contain people like the foster father and people like Tae-sung at the same time. Then she gathered her materials and headed back to the apartment, because Camila needed to know. The scary tattooed man wasn't their enemy. He might actually be their salvation. Things were quiet for 3 days. Camila got the girls enrolled in school using Mrs. Liang as a temporary guardian on the paperwork. Detective Kane checked in daily, but kept his distance. Tae-sung didn't appear again, but small gifts kept arriving. Groceries, school supplies, a laptop for Indy with a note that just said, for research. Camila wanted to refuse it all, but Soleil's laughter as she unpacked new clothes. Indy's joy at having a computer for her studies. She couldn't take that away from them. But peace never lasted. On the 4th day, Baek Phantom Hyun-woo made his move. Phantom was everything Tae-sung could have become if he'd chosen cruelty over code. Young, ruthless, and hungry for power, he'd been pushing into Tae-sung's territory for months, and he'd noticed the boss's unusual interest in 3 black girls staying above Mrs. Liang's friend's laundromat. Camila was walking Soleil home from school when the black SUV pulled up. 3 men got out, and she immediately knew something was wrong. She grabbed Soleil's hand and started walking faster, but they cut off her path. Camila Brooks! The lead man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Our boss would like to talk to you. Not interested. Camila pulled Soleil behind her, looking for escape routes. Wasn't really a request, sweetheart. What happened next occurred in seconds. The man reached for Camila. She kicked his knee hard, and he went down cursing. But there were 2 others, and they were bigger, stronger. She fought like a wildcat, screaming for Soleil to run, but one of them had her arms pinned behind her back. Then Soleil did something incredibly brave and incredibly stupid. She bit the man holding Camila, sinking her teeth into his hand until she drew blood. You little... He raised his hand to strike an 8-year-old. The hand never connected. Tae-sung appeared like a ghost, catching the man's wrist mid-swing with a grip that made bones creak. The geometric tattoos on his neck seemed to pulse with barely contained rage. "You were about to hit a child," Tae-sung said quietly, each word measured and lethal. "In my territory. Explain to me why I shouldn't break every bone in your hand." "Phantom's orders." "Phantom doesn't give orders here." Tae-sung twisted the wrist slightly, and the man went to his knees. "Call him. Tell him to meet me at the warehouse in 1 hour, and tell him if he ever sends anyone near these girls again, there won't be enough of him left to identify." The men scrambled back to their SUV and fled. Tae-sung immediately turned to Camila and Soleil, his expression shifting from fury to concern. "Are you hurt?" His hands hovered over them, checking for injuries but not touching without permission. "We're fine," Camila managed, though she was shaking. "Soleil, baby, are you okay?" Soleil nodded, but she was crying now, the adrenaline wearing off. Tae-sung knelt down to her level. "You were very brave," he said softly, "but please don't bite people anymore. You might catch something." Despite everything, Soleil laughed through her tears. Tae-sung pulled out a handkerchief, perfectly white, perfectly pressed, and gently wiped her face. "Where's Indy?" he asked Camila. "Library. She stays late on Tuesdays." "Daewon," Tae-sung spoke into his phone without looking away from the girls. "Pick up Indy from the public library. Bring her to my place. Safe route, no tail." He hung up. "You're all staying with me tonight. Non-negotiable." "We can't." "They know where you live, Camila. They know your schedule. They'll come back." Tae-sung stood, his jaw tight. "I have to handle Phantom, but I'm not leaving you three unprotected. My apartment has security, guards, everything you need. You'll be safe there while I end this." "By end this, you mean..." I'm going to have a very clear conversation about boundaries and consequences." Tae-sung's eyes were hard. "Nobody threatens children in my city. Nobody." Tae-sung's apartment was nothing like Camila expected. She'd pictured something dark, maybe garish, definitely masculine and cold. Instead, it was minimalist and clean, with Korean art on the walls and shelves full of books, many in English, teaching himself the language through literature. Daewon arrived with Indy, who immediately ran to her sisters. "What happened? Are you okay?" "We're fine. Scary Mafia man saved us." Soleil was sitting on a leather couch that probably cost more than their entire foster care stipend, eating cookies that Tae-sung's housekeeper had provided. "Phantom made a move," Daewon explained quietly to Tae-sung. "He's been waiting for an opening. Then I'll give him one. Me, alone, the warehouse." Tae-sung was already changing into different clothes, still black but looser, easier to move in. "You stay here with them, boss." "That's an order, Daewon." Tae-sung strapped on a knife, just one concealed at his back. "If I'm not back in 2 hours, call Kane. He's not a friend, but he's honest. He'll make sure the girls are protected." "Wait." Camila stood up. "You're going alone to fight a gang boss?" "I'm going alone to end a problem." Tae-sung checked his watch. "Phantom wants my territory. He thinks I've gone soft because I'm helping you three. I need to remind him why everyone calls me the Silent Guardian." "That's a terrible superhero name," Indy muttered, earning a surprised laugh from Tae-sung. "You're right, but it's accurate." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Camila, there's art supplies in the second bedroom if you want to draw." "Indy, the laptop's connected to my library account. Download whatever you want." "Soleil." He thought for a moment, then went to a closet and pulled out a stuffed tiger, still in packaging. "I was saving this for... well, I don't know, but it's yours now." "You bought a stuffed animal and just kept it?" Camila asked, something softening in her chest. "I buy a lot of things I don't need, hoping someday I'd have someone to give them to." Tae-sung smiled sadly. "Stay safe, I'll be back soon." After he left, the three sisters sat in stunned silence in an apartment worth more than they'd seen in their entire lives, protected by a man they'd met 4 days ago, waiting for him to maybe die protecting them. "This is insane," Camila finally said. "This is family," Indy corrected quietly. "Weird, chosen, possibly illegal family, but family." Day One, sitting by the window with a gun casually visible in his shoulder holster, smiled. "You three have no idea what you've done to him. I've known Boss for 15 years. Never seen him care about anything except survival. Then you show up, and suddenly he's buying stuffed animals and threatening gang bosses over an 8-year-old. Is he going to be okay?" Soleil asked, clutching her new tiger. "Boss? He's survived worse, much worse." But even Day One looked worried. Phantom's young and ambitious, dangerous combination. The 2 hours that followed were the longest of Camila's life. She tried to draw but couldn't focus. Indy read the same page 15 times. Soleil fell asleep with the tiger, exhausted from fear and adrenaline. Then Tae-sung's phone, the one he'd left on the counter, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your boss is bleeding out in the warehouse. Come alone if you want him to see morning." P. Day One saw it the same time Camila did. His face went white. "It's a trap." "Then call Kane," Camila urged, "and admit Boss lost a fight. That shows weakness to every territory boss in the city." Day One was already grabbing his coat. "I have to go." "You can't leave us here alone. I can't let him die." They were still arguing when the apartment door opened. Tae-sung walked in, blood on his shirt, a cut above his eye, but very much alive. Behind him, being dragged by 2 of Tae-sung's men, was Phantom, beaten, humiliated, but also alive. "Sorry I'm late," Tae-sung said calmly, as if he wasn't bleeding. "Had to have a longer conversation than expected." "Boss, the text," Day One started, "was from Phantom's phone, sent by one of his idiots who thought I was down." Tae-sung dropped into a chair with a wince. "I wasn't." Camila was already moving, grabbing first aid supplies she'd spotted earlier in the bathroom. "Sit still," she ordered, her hands surprisingly steady as she cleaned the cut above his eye. "You've done this before," Tae-sung observed. "Foster care teaches you a lot of skills." Camila worked efficiently, years of patching up her sisters after bullies or accidents making her movements confident. "This needs stitches." "I'll survive. You'll get an infection." She met his eyes. "Why did you do that? Risk your life for us?" "Because nobody else would." Tae-sung winced as she applied antiseptic. "And because you three reminded me what I was supposed to be protecting all along. Not territory. Not money. People. Family. We're not your family. Not yet. But you could be." He looked at all 3 girls, Indy watching with analytical eyes, Soleil sleeping with her tiger, Camila's hands gentle despite her tough exterior. "If you wanted. If you'd trust me." "Trust is earned," Camila said, applying a butterfly bandage since he refused proper stitches. "Then let me earn it." Tae-sung caught her hand gently. "I know you've been hurt. I know the system failed you, but I'm not the system. I'm just a man who was alone for too long and found 3 girls who deserve better than alleys and fear." "What are you offering?" "Protection. Real protection. School for all 3 of you. A home that's actually safe. And when you turn 18, Camila, if you still want to leave, I'll help you. But until then, let me do what I couldn't do for myself, give you a chance." Camila looked at her sisters. Indy nodded slightly. Soleil, even in sleep, clutched that tiger like it was precious. "One condition," Camila said finally. "Name it." "You teach me to fight. Really fight. So next time I can protect them too." Tae-sung smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. "Deal." 6 months later, Camila sat in the window of what was now officially their home, not Tae-sung's apartment, but a brownstone he'd bought 3 blocks from Mrs. Liang's restaurant. Close enough for community, far enough for independence. She was sketching Soleil, who was doing homework at the kitchen table, her hair in neat braids that Tae-sung had surprisingly learned to do from YouTube videos. Indy was on the couch with her laptop, already taking online college courses, despite being only 12, because Tae-sung believed in feeding curious minds. The brownstone was theirs legally now, Tae-sung had worked with Detective Kane, an alliance that surprised everyone, to navigate the foster system. Kane had found loopholes, Tae-sung had paid lawyers, and Mrs. Liang had provided character witnesses. The result? Legal guardianship, with Tae-sung as their official guardian, until Kamala turned 18. It wasn't perfect. Social workers still checked in monthly. The community gossiped about the crime boss raising 3 black girls. Phantom's faction still caused problems, though they'd learned to stay away from the Guardian's daughters, as the streets now called them. But it was real. It was safe. It was home. Tae-sung came through the door at 6 p.m. sharp, as he did every day now. His business had shifted. Less shadowy deals, more legitimate protection services, community investment. He was slowly transitioning from crime boss to community guardian, and while it meant less power, it meant sleeping better at night. "How was school?" he asked, setting down bags of groceries. He'd learned to cook Korean food, then soul food, then a bizarre fusion that somehow worked. "Boring," Soleil reported. "But I got an A on my math test." "Of course you did, you're brilliant." Tae-sung ruffled her hair, then looked at Indy. "And you? Finished that essay on quantum mechanics?" "Sent it to the professor an hour ago. She said I have grad student level analysis." Indy beamed. Naturally. He turned to Kamala. "And you? Art show coming up?" "Next month. I'm nervous." Kamala had been accepted to a prestigious arts high school, something she'd never dreamed possible. Her work was being featured in a student exhibition, pieces that told stories of survival, family, and unexpected guardians. "Don't be. You're extraordinary." Tae-sung started unpacking groceries, comfortable in the domestic routine. "Oh, Mrs. Liang wants us for dinner Sunday. She's making galbi." "Can we go?" Soleil asked eagerly. "Like I'd say no to Mrs. Liang." Tae-sung smiled. She'd hunt me down. Later that night, after Soleil was asleep and Indy was absorbed in research, Camilla joined Tae-sung on the roof garden he'd built. The geometric patterns of his tattoos were visible in the moonlight, and she'd brought her sketchbook. "Can I draw them?" she asked. "Your tattoos for my show." "Why?" "Because they tell a story. Protection, survival, family." She sat down next to him. "They're not scary anymore, they're beautiful." Tae-sung was quiet for a moment. "You've changed my life, you know, all 3 of you. You saved ours. We saved each other." He looked at the city spread below them. "I was dying, Camila. Maybe not physically, but inside. Building an empire with no one to share it with. Protecting territory with no one to come home to. You 3 gave me purpose. We gave you chaos," Camila corrected with a smile. "Best kind of chaos." He turned to her. "Thank you for trusting me, for staying, for teaching me what family actually means." Camila began to sketch, her pencil capturing the intricate geometries of his tattoos, the patterns that had protected him through darkness, and now represented something new. Chosen family, deliberate love, the family you build from broken pieces. "You know what's funny?" she said as she drew. "That first night I thought you were a monster, but you were just lonely like us." "We were all lost," Tae-sung agreed, "but we found each other." Below, in the brownstone, Indy looked up from her laptop and smiled at Soleil's peaceful, sleeping face. Detective Kane drove by on patrol and saw the lights on, nodding with satisfaction. This was one case with a happy ending. Mrs. Liang, 3 blocks away, said a prayer of thanks for broken people finding wholeness together. And in the studio apartment across the street, a young photographer captured a moment. 3 black girls and their Korean guardian, silhouetted against the Chicago skyline, geometric tattoos, and found family creating new patterns of protection, new definitions of home. The Korean Mafia boss was alone no more. 3 black girls had changed his destiny, and he had changed theirs. Together they had built something the world said was impossible, a family forged not in blood, but in choice, protection, and unconditional love. The geometries of their lives had aligned perfectly, creating a pattern more beautiful than any sacred tattoo, the pattern of belonging.